have the poem called Kubla Khan, and it announces at the beginning it's a fragment that is only a part of a whole story. It's unfinished, as it seems deliberately unfinished. But that makes it consistent with the romantic poems we've read so far and the whole idea of the romantic movement, that you'll keep running across this idea expressed in different ways, that incomplete and uncertain and unfinished things are better than what seems more perfect, that the imperfect is higher than the perfect. That's a hallmark, a marker, a sign, something definitional, part of what it means for a thing to be romantic. And we saw that in the Keats poem, that certainly a song is imperfect if you can't hear it. And something very important part of a song is missing. But that is the paradoxical argument that Keats wants to make. The song you can't hear is more beautiful than the one that you can. So where do these romantic poems fit in our syllabus? Why are we studying this semester? Well, we're concerned with what it means to be modern. And that has led us to the people who were clearly modern but didn't like it. They rejected it, so that gives us a certain insight into what it is and how we ourselves should respond to it. We're investigating the idea of what it is to be modern, and we're in the downside of that investigation in these later readings. Why do people who are living in modern centuries have reservations about modernism? We're modern. Why don't they like it? They live under the triumph of democratic politics and scientific knowledge, but reject those things. And by doing so, they really reject modernism at its core. So that's interesting to us because we're trying to understand what it means to be modern. Of course, you have to check in with the people who don't like it. And romantics are high on that list of the people who officially do not like, particularly the scientific aspect of modernism. The topic of perfection has come up before in our semester. Way back at the beginning, I'm looking at the part 4 of Descartes' Discourse. This is the page about his proof for the existence of God. We don't have to go into the details, but he did consider what does it mean to be perfect, and he was using an old argument that took the premise that whatever is real is more perfect than what's unreal. And we don't have to look into the complications of how he played with this argument and the trickiness of it, but that I think we could take as Descartes' final opinion. Anything real is better than what is ideal, and that's how he rejected the old morality, which was ideal and meant for angels, and kept to the real one as he understood it, meant for human beings. But this is a modern and scientific opinion, that the real is better than the ideal. And that's explicitly what the Romantics rejected. And they defined themselves by turning away from what probably seems obviously true. After all, wouldn't you rather have $1 million than the idea of $1 million? If you could go to the movies and watch somebody else falling in love, and that might be a good movie, but wouldn't you rather fall in love yourself, at least if the love story has a happy ending? Isn't the real better than the ideal? That seems obvious, and yet strong minds question it, and it's worth our thinking over, and that's why we're looking at the Romantics. And this is a good text, this poem we have for today, the poem called Kubla Khan. That's a good text for considering this idea and testing the proposition, because it clearly rejects the real in favor of the ideal. The pre-moderns generally took a middle position. It's good to keep the ideal in mind. It's good to know where it is, and choose your reality with out of some understanding of what the ideal would be. So That's sort of like knowing where the North Star is and using it to guide you through life without actually thinking that you can go to the North Star. So the ideal is the ideal. You can't reach the star, but the ideal helps point you in the right direction. That would be different from a modern ambition. This travel adventure that was only achieved during the modern age to actually go to the North Pole. That would be a good deal. And the romantics take the other side of that proposition. If the first moderns said we shouldn't bother with ideals if they can't be real for us, we should choose new standards that can be real. Then the romantics took the exact opposite view. We should explicitly choose impossible or imaginary ideals because we need the emotions that go along with that, the enthusiasm. We need the arrows of desire, as Blake would say, without treating the ideal as better than the real or as the true and higher real. We don't have our spirits in the right condition. We can't get where we want to go. So let's turn to the poem. That's a general remarks about why we'd be interested in this poem, but let's actually go and do it. Now, Kubla Khan is a poem of 3 stanzas. You can see the break in the left column. And the second stanza is the long one that runs over toward the top of the right column. There's a break for the last stanza. And the first 2 talk about the ruler Kubla Khan and his magnificent palace called Xanadu. And the last stanza talks more generally about what the poem is for and how we might react to it. Now, it seems there was a real Kubla Khan. Khan is an actual title that comes up in history. I think Coleridge was not very interested in that. He liked the sound of these words and the vague sense of foreignness and importance would have appealed to his English audience without being checked or limited in any way by historical reality. That's all in keeping of with the way the poem is put together. So the first stanza then tells some details about the magnificent palace where the Kubla Khan lived and ruled. The second stanza gets more deeply into the exotic and paradoxical aspects of this palace, and just begins toward the top of the right-hand column. Just begins to get into a story that there's a rumor of war, and the historical or the narrative part, the story part of the poem breaks off at that point. Magnificent ruler with a fantastically beautiful palace, and the very beginning of a historical drama. And the last stanza talks about the power of images and the importance of things that inspire the imagination. So it's in some ways reflective on what's come already. If the poem works for you, then you feel your imagination stimulated. And then the final stanza can tell you what that might be worth to the power of your spirit and the way you get through life. Now, I don't want to go too far in explaining the symbolism or giving my explanation of the symbolism of this poem to say how I think it might stir up dreams in us, how I think it might stimulate our imagination. Not because I don't think that's important for this poem, just the opposite. I think the point to this poem is that it will work on your imagination, create beautiful pictures and dreams for you if you're open to it. But I think I won't do it because that might restrict other people from doing it in their own way. And one thing I've learned over the years about AUIS students is that one of their great strengths is their poetic imagination. There are always students who love poetry in any one class, and always people who make brilliant connections and follow the lead of a poet in interesting new directions. I don't want to get in the way of you doing the best work of the class by doing it maybe not so well myself. But I can probably help you with the language, so just looking at the beginning. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled round. And there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree, and here were forests, ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. So there's a ruler, he has a title, Kubla Khan. He's given a name to his house. It's no ordinary house. He's called it Xanadu. It's a pleasure dome, a place of beauty for him to enjoy himself. And it's stately, so it's enjoyable, but reserved and impressive. And he decreed it. So, this is the sort of ruler he is. His word makes things happen. He says there should be a beautiful palace, and that's enough to make it happen. He has that kind of power. And there's a river also with a name, said to be sacred, that runs through the palace grounds. And he imagines that it flows through the palace grounds and then goes into caves underneath the earth. This is part of the symbolism that the surface is beautiful and sunny, but there's something dark and fathomless. You cannot get to the bottom of it underneath. And of course the magic has to do with the choice of the words and the music behind the words. So, sinuous rills. What does that mean? It means something simple. The hills went up and down. But to say sinuous rills instead of saying it had hills that went up and down, to say sinuous rills gives you the flavor and helps to enhance the feeling of what that kind of landscape looks like, with the smooth S's, the shape of the letters, and the flowing sound goes along with the thing that's described. And then that's the excellence, the talent behind this poem of fitting in words that have that full dimension, the look and the feeling of them and the images all contribute to making the meaning of the words stronger and all point to one moving experience. So there are beautiful trees that smell nice, right, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree, and forests ancient as the hills. So, a common expression in English, ancient as the hills. As old, not older than all the buildings, as old as the land itself. Enfolding sunny spots of greenery. So beautiful gardens in the sunshine.